This time on Film Ranker, we are looking at the great Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick directed 13 films over almost half a century, and what sets him apart other than his consistent quality is his range. Kubrick's films would be in the conversation for greatest ever in at least half a dozen genres. He was able to completely change his style and bring a new bag of tricks to every film, from comedy to sci-fi to horror to history. It's a filmography that will likely never be matched, so let's count them down. Number 13, Fear and Desire. This is Kubrick's first film outside of 2 excellent shorts and the first of 4 subversive films about war. It does look like a first film, but to be fair, he made it with less money than you spent on your last car. The biggest flaw is that the audio was recorded after the fact, which makes it look a little bit like it's dubbed into English. It's a little bit experimental, but there's enough flair that at least a few of the right people took notice. Number 12, Killer's Kiss. Kubrick's second film is a big jump forward. This story of a boxer, dancer, gangster love triangle might not be as dynamic as his later work, but there are some standout scenes. The boxing in particular builds on his work from his early short Day of the Fight and helped create the mold for films like Raging Bull. It's overall a little bit paint by numbers, but it's worth a watch. Number 11, Spartacus. This was a huge turning point for Kubrick, both due to its success, which helped catapult his name recognition, as well as for his swearing off the classic studio system due to his frustration in making this movie. After Spartacus, Kubrick took complete control of all of his films. Not that Spartacus is a bad movie. It's actually outstanding in parts. The road lined with crucifixes, the slave revolts, etc., but it does have a lot of extra fluff, including a tacked-on romance and probably a few too many Oscar bait scenes. Number 10, The Killing. This might be Kubrick's most underappreciated film. In a lot of ways, this is Kubrick's first real movie, and it's a tight noir heist. The heart of it is a solid performance by Sterling Hayden, who would return to work on Strangelove. It's efficient, it's smart, and it's got a few nice twists. It's well worth tracking down if you missed it. Number 9, Eyes Wide Shut. There have long been rumors that the final cut wasn't quite finished before Kubrick's death. The key scene that people point to is the pool table scene that kind of undercuts the rest of the film, but whether or not what we have would have been the final, the movie that we have is a lot better than it gets credit for. This sex club Alice in Wonderland has more than a few iconic scenes, both with weird Italian masks and without. And it features one of Nicole Kidman's career best performances. Number 8, Paths of Glory. Another under-the-radar early film. Paths of Glory is about the politics of war. The battle scenes are surprisingly effective for the budget. Douglas is excellent as the colonel/defense lawyer, and the story of 3 men being court-martialed by an ambitious general who ordered a suicide mission is a powerful subversion of the ideas of patriotism, glory, and sacrifice. Number 7, Lolita. Kubrick has often said that if he knew how much his controversial film would be censored, he never would have made it. But even as it is, the subject matter raised more than a few eyebrows back in its day. It's a real balancing act of a film that is held aloft by James Mason's performance as the sad and desperate predator Humbert, as well as by Sue Lyon's surprisingly complex Lolita, and of course, Peter Sellers, who stretches his virtuosic range as the chameleon Claire Quilty. Number 6, Barry Lyndon. Every single shot in Barry Lyndon is a work of art. It is like an oil painting in motion. The attention to detail is breathtaking, from the costumes to the sets to the music to the decision to use only natural light. The story of rags to riches and virtue to vice is often engrossing, but it does get bogged down in parts of the more than 3-hour runtime. It's an epic tale of war and love and status that ebbs and flows, and ultimately dies in a whimper. Number 5. Full Metal Jacket. Even if the only selling point of this film was Lee Ermey's performance, it would still be top 5 material, but he is just the tip of the iceberg. Full Metal Jacket is kind of 2 movies in one. The first features the defining look at boot camp as the aforementioned Ermey tears down Vincent D'Onofrio's private pile. The second sees Modine's wisecracking writer get a first-hand taste of war alongside Animal Mother and the gang. It's a study in light and dark, both metaphorically and literally, and even in a decade that saw films like Platoon, Hamburger Hill, and Casualties of War, it still stood apart from the pack. Number 4. The Shining. As much as Stephen King may dislike it, The Shining remains the best adaptation of any of the author's work and one of the greatest horror films of all time. Just look at Ready Player One to see its lasting impact. Kubrick builds tension moment by moment, using everything at his disposal to keep us fixed on the screen with our ears perked and our eyes wide. When Danny rolls his big wheel across that 70s carpeting, we listen to every bump, and by the time he runs into the twins, the payoff is almost too creepy. Kubrick's perfect atmosphere is heightened even more by the performance of Shelley Duvall and, of course, Jack Nicholson. It is pretty darn close to being the perfect horror film. Number 3. A Clockwork Orange. It seems strange to think that one of the most popular directors of his generation at the top of his game could create one of the greatest cult films of all time, but that was the case with A Clockwork Orange. This kind of sci-fi, kind of satirical look into the lives of Alex and his droogs scandalized the polite British film-going public and has since become almost a rite of passage for movie-loving 20-somethings ever since. It has a style and a language that is all its own, part 70s, part the future, all backed by the soundtrack of Beethoven. It's the movie your parents walked out of and you dressed like for Halloween. Number 2. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This satirical look at the Cold War only gets more poignant with each passing year. It has multiple threads cut together, and each is as terrific as the last. From Slim Pickens and a very young James Earl Jones in The Plane That Can't Be Called Back, to Sterling Hayden's paranoid and patriotic general who is concerned for America's precious bodily fluids, to the war room itself with George C. Scott trying to protect that big board. Of course, at the center of it all is Peter Sellers, who has the best multiple character performance in history. Between Mandrake, the President, and the titular Strangelove, Sellers shows a range in one film that most actors don't achieve in their entire career. It might just be the smartest, truly hilarious comedy that has ever been made. Number 1. 2001. A Space Odyssey. It is difficult to overstate the impact that 2001 had on the world of film. This movie was almost as big a leap for film as the moon landing was a step for mankind. And speaking of the moon landing, it's almost inconceivable that Kubrick managed to nail it so exactly the year before mankind actually touched down. Watching this film makes it easy to see where the conspiracy theorists are coming from, but it isn't just one part. Each chapter of this film is both different and incredible in its own way. It's a journey that I wish I could have been on in 1968. It's such a huge jump in filmmaking that it would have been difficult to grasp. It still is. Arthur C. Clarke's script is so smart and just the right amount of nebulous. The effects were part magic, part premonition, and Hal is the ultimate movie villain. For all of Kubrick's works of genius, this is his defining moment. And that is it. Let me know how you rank these films in the comments, and if there are any on this list that you haven't seen, I strongly recommend that you go find them. There is not a bad one in the bunch. Also, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all next time.